Welcome, dear detective lovers, to a new tale from Mystery Vault. Today we journey back to 1930 to the mystery of Montrose Manor. Hercule Poirot and his companion Captain Hastings find themselves engaged in a family mystery, the truth behind a perplexing death at the manor 15 years prior. Would the famous detective and his grey cells be able to unlock a 15-year-old mystery? And if you enjoy this journey, please consider subscribing, giving this video a thumbs up, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Let the story begin. A Christmas invitation and a new discovery. Hercule Poirot, a creature of precise habits and a connoisseur of quiet contemplation, had envisioned a rather unadventurous Christmas. He pictured himself ensconced in his comfortable London flat, perhaps meticulously polishing his collection of rare porcelain, or indulging in a particularly challenging jigsaw puzzle. Detective work, he felt, could wait until the new year. Captain Hastings, however, always seemed to attract the unexpected, and Poirot, by association, often found his peaceful plans delightfully upended. The disruption arrived in the form of a delicate, cream-coloured envelope delivered with the morning post to Poirot's door. Hastings, who was sharing a leisurely breakfast with Poirot, watched as his friend meticulously slit open the seal. "Ah, Hastings," Poirot murmured, his brow furrowing slightly as he scanned the elegant script. "It appears my quiet Christmas may be postponed." "Oh," Hastings asked, intrigued. "A new case? I thought you were determined to avoid any unnecessary mental exertion until January."
"Indeed I was," Poirot replied, a faint sigh escaping him. "But this is from Lady Eleanor Montrose, an invitation, quite unexpected, to her ancestral home, Montrose Manor, for the festive season."
He held out the first page. Polite, as you see, but there is a second page marked personal and urgent. Poirot unfolded the second sheet, his eyes narrowing as he read. "Listen to this, Hastings. Lady Eleanor writes that during the recent sorting of her late husband, Sir Reginald Montrose's, old papers, a young archivist made a peculiar discovery. A small, intricately folded piece of parchment, she says, found hidden in a desk drawer." Hastings leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. "Hidden? That sounds promising already, doesn't it?" Poirot nodded, his finger tracing the words on the page. "More than promising, mon ami. She states the parchment contains lines in Sir Reginald's distinct hand, written in a personal code he occasionally used. Lady Eleanor, with considerable effort, has deciphered fragments, and these fragments, Hastings, are most disquieting." He paused, his gaze meeting Hastings's. "She quotes, 'secure. Leverage and my hold.'" "Leverage? Your hold?" Hastings repeated, a frown creasing his brow. "That sounds rather ominous, not exactly Christmas cheer, eh?"
"Precisely," Poirot agreed, a grim line forming on his lips. "She writes that this chilling discovery, made only days ago, has resurrected her long-dormant doubts about Sir Reginald's seemingly accidental death 15 years ago. It seems the official verdict no longer satisfies her, and so she has called for me, for Hercule Poirot."
Poirot refolded the letter carefully, tucking it back into its envelope. "It appears, Hastings, that the quiet of Montrose Manor holds a very old secret. And it is a secret that, unlike my puzzles, will not be solved without considerable mental exertion."
He looked at his friend with a resigned, yet strangely invigorated expression. "Fetch your coat, Hastings. It seems our Christmas will be spent in the pursuit of truth."
The perfect accident reconsidered. The journey from London to Montrose Manor was a study in contrasts for Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. The bustling gas-lit streets of the capital gradually gave way to the hushed, snow-dusted lanes of the English countryside. The air grew crisper, the silence deeper, until they finally pulled up to the imposing, yet somewhat melancholy, facade of Montrose Manor. It was a house built for grandeur, its stone walls now draped in a fresh blanket of white, lending it an austere beauty under the winter sky. "Quite the place, isn't it, Poirot?" Hastings remarked, stamping his feet on the gravel drive as he surveyed the snow-laden gables. "Looks as if it's been standing for centuries. A perfect setting for a quiet country Christmas, if not for this business." "Indeed, Hastings, though I suspect quiet will be far from the truth here," Poirot replied, adjusting his scarf with a precise movement. Stepping inside, the vast entrance hall immediately commanded attention. But it was not the ancestral portraits or the gleaming suits of armour that drew Poirot's eye. His gaze was fixed on the grand staircase that swept majestically upwards, its polished wood and intricate balusters a testament to a bygone era of opulence. This, then, was the very spot where Sir Reginald Montrose had met his end. The central, unavoidable feature of the house, it now seemed to Poirot less a staircase and more a stage where a tragedy had unfolded. Lady Eleanor, fragile yet determined, greeted them, her eyes, though weary, holding a spark of hope. After the initial polite exchanges and the settling of their modest luggage, the conversation inevitably turned to the patriarch, Sir Reginald, and the events of that fateful night 15 years ago. "It was just after dinner, Monsieur Poirot," Lady Eleanor began, her voice soft but steady, as they stood by the foot of the grand staircase. Sir Reginald had been in a heated discussion. He was a man of strong opinions, as you might imagine. "A family argument, Lady Eleanor," Hastings prompted gently, trying to piece together the scene. "Yes, Captain. Over certain matters of family business," she confirmed, a shadow passing over her face. He was in mid-sentence, quite emphatic, when he suddenly clutched his chest. "The doctor said it was a heart attack. He stumbled here at the top of the stairs and fell." Her voice caught. "He died instantly."
Poirot listened, his head cocked slightly, his eyes missing nothing, as Lady Eleanor recounted the official story that had settled over the house like a shroud. Sir Reginald, a man remembered by all as formidable, even tyrannical, had supposedly suffered a sudden heart attack, mid-dispute, stumbled and plummeted down the grand staircase, dying instantly upon impact at the bottom.
"And who was present, Lady Eleanor?" Poirot asked, his voice low. "Most of the household, I believe," she replied, her gaze distant. "Myself, Marcus, Camilla, and Doctor." Alistair Finch was called immediately, of course. He was dining nearby that evening, fortunately. "And Dr. Finch?" Hastings interjected. "He confirmed it was a heart attack?" "Oh, yes," Lady Eleanor said, nodding. "He was quite definite. He certified the death as an accidental fatality due to cardiac arrest, exacerbated by the fall. The local constabulary, after what they deemed a thorough investigation, confirmed Dr. Finch's findings, closing the case and sealing the official verdict." "So no foul play suspected at the time?" Poirot clarified, his gaze fixed on the first step of the staircase. "None at all, Monsieur Poirot. It was a tragic accident," Lady Eleanor insisted, though a lingering doubt in her eyes betrayed her own reason for calling him. As Lady Eleanor spoke, a subtle tension permeated the air, a silent agreement among the household not to challenge the established narrative. Hastings, ever the straightforward observer, saw a tragic, if unfortunate, accident. But Poirot, his little grey cells already at work, felt the familiar prickle of unease. A sudden heart attack, a fall down a magnificent, well-maintained staircase, it was all too neat, too perfectly accidental. And now, armed with the knowledge of Sir Reginald's coded note, Poirot knew he was standing at the threshold of a story far more intricate and sinister than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The quiet manor held its breath, awaiting the unsettling whisper of a hidden truth. A family under observation. With the official narrative of Sir Reginald's death firmly established, Hercule Poirot now turned his meticulous attention to the living. The Montrose household, outwardly a picture of British propriety, became his new canvas for observation. He understood that true emotions often resided not in overt declarations, but in the subtle shifts of an eye, the tightness of a smile, or the unspoken silences between family members. Captain Hastings, ever observant of Poirot's methods, watched closely, trying to decipher the unstated meanings alongside his friend. Poirot began his subtle probing, guiding conversations as if merely making polite introductions. He started with Marquis Montrose, Sir Reginald's eldest son and the current master of the estate. Marcus presented himself as dutiful, a man seemingly burdened by the weight of inheritance and responsibility. "It must be a considerable task, taking on the running of such a large estate," Poirot remarked to Marcus over afternoon tea, his gaze resting briefly on the man's hands, which fidgeted almost imperceptibly with his teacup. Marcus gave a tired sigh. "It is, Monsieur Poirot. My father kept a tight grip on everything. Even after his passing, he believed in absolute control." There was a deep weariness in his tone and a hint of resentment that Marcus worked hard to conceal. "He was a strong personality, then," Hastings offered, prompting. "Strong, Captain." "He was a force of nature," Marcus replied, a wry, almost bitter smile touching his lips. "His decisions were rarely questioned and never successfully overturned. One simply adapted." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And his habits? Was he a man of rigid routine, Monsieur Montrose?" Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Extremely so. Every day was planned to the minute, especially his evenings." Next, Poirot turned his attention to Camilla Montrose, the daughter. She possessed an undeniable outward charm and an effortless poise, a testament to her aristocratic upbringing. But to Poirot's discerning eye, this veneer of composure felt brittle, like fine porcelain, ready to crack under pressure. "Mademoiselle Camilla, you seem to bring a certain vivacity to Montrose Manor," Poirot complimented, though his gaze was assessing. "Was your father as appreciative of such spirit?" Camilla's smile tightened for a moment before she replied. "Papa had very firm ideas about what was proper, Monsieur Poirot, especially for a young lady. He believed in structure, in decorum." Her voice was light, but Poirot noticed a quick, almost imperceptible darting glance towards the empty fireplace, as if a ghost of a stern gaze still resided there. One learned to accommodate his expectations. "He sounds rather strict," Hastings commented, picking up on the underlying tension. "Strict? That's putting it mildly, Captain," Camilla said, a flicker of past pain in her eyes that was quickly masked. "He dictated everything, from my wardrobe to my chosen reading, even who I might spend my time with." Her composure seemed to tighten further, hinting at past emotional scars from her father's pervasive control. Finally, Poirot engaged Dr. Alistair Finch, the long-serving family physician. Dr. Finch was the epitome of medical professionalism, precise in his language, composed in his demeanour, and seemingly unflappable. "Doctor, you have served the Montrose family for many years," Poirot began, his voice polite. "You must have known Sir Reginald perhaps as well as anyone, given your professional insights into his health." "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot," Dr. Finch replied, his voice calm and even. "Sir Reginald was a robust man for his age, though prone to the occasional ailment, as we all are. His heart, for instance, sometimes gave him minor palpitations. Nothing alarming, you understand, merely a slight irregularity." "And on the evening of his unfortunate accident, Doctor, did you observe anything out of the ordinary in his health or mood?" Hastings asked, referring to his notes. He even allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile at the last word. Indeed, he was too perfect, Poirot thought. His composure never wavered, his voice never faltered. Poirot orchestrated his questions with surgical precision, delving into Sir Reginald's character, his known habits, and the precise events leading up to his final evening. He paid close attention to the subtle shifts in their demeanours, the momentary hesitations, the slight tightening of muscles around a jaw, or the sudden, almost imperceptible flicker in their eyes. He noted the inconsistencies in their collective memories, or the carefully harmonized uniformity that felt, to Poirot, even more suspicious than outright contradiction. Hastings, keenly observing his friend's intense scrutiny, silently revised his own initial, simpler assessments. The Montrose family, it became clear, was a finely tuned orchestra, playing a complex, well-rehearsed symphony of grief and acceptance. But Poirot knew that even the most accomplished musicians could miss a single, discordant note, a tiny detail that would unravel the entire composition and reveal the true melody beneath. The old tragedy of the grand staircase, far from being a closed chapter, seemed to vibrate with unspoken secrets, each family member holding a piece of a puzzle they either could not or would not articulate. Reconstructing the last night, with his initial observations complete, Poirot embarked on the meticulous process of reconstructing Sir Reginald's final evening. He understood that the past, like a finely woven tapestry, often revealed its secrets through careful examination of each individual thread. He would interview each key member of the household, Marcus, Camilla, Dr. Finch, and Mrs. Gable, not once, but multiple times, pressing them gently for the minutest details, seeking the cracks in memory or the subtle hesitations that might betray a hidden truth. Captain Hastings, ever Poirot's faithful companion, made careful notes, occasionally offering a straightforward observation or a question that, in its simplicity, sometimes cut to the heart of the matter. He began with Marcus. The son, still outwardly burdened by his father's legacy, recounted the evening in a manner that was both deferential and guarded. "My father. He was a man of firm opinions, Monsieur Poirot," Marcus stated, his gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the detective. "We had, shall we say, a vigorous discussion earlier that evening. About the estate, naturally. He had certain plans I found challenging." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Challenging how, Monsieur Montrose? A disagreement of a purely financial nature?"
Marcus shifted, a muscle in his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Predominantly, though my father rarely separated the financial from the personal. He believed his will should be absolute in all matters, but we concluded without lingering animosity, I assure you. I retired to the library after dinner, engrossed in ledgers, heard nothing further until—" He trailed off, a flicker of pain crossing his face, until the shouts.
"So no further interaction after dinner?" Hastings interjected, looking up from his notebook. "No sound of raised voices from the drawing-room?" Marcus shook his head. "None, Captain. Not from the library, at least. I was quite engrossed." Camilla, when her turn came, painted a picture of a strained but ultimately normal evening. "Papa could be quite demanding," she admitted, her voice a little too light. "I had a rather sharp word with him regarding my social engagements. He felt they were frivolous. A common occurrence, I assure you." She offered a brittle smile. "I sought solace in my embroidery after that. I retired early, Monsieur Poirot. Had no notion of the disaster until the ensuing commotion." "And the precise hour of your retirement, mademoiselle?" Poirot pressed gently. "And the sounds you might have heard? The presence or absence of others in the hall, perhaps?" Camilla's answers were consistent, delivered with a practiced ease that made them feel almost too perfect. "Just before 10, I believe. The house was quite quiet. No one was about, not that I noticed." Hastings frowned. "You didn't see anyone else either downstairs or going up before you went to your room?" "No, Captain," Camilla confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "The hall was quite empty when I went up." Dr. Finch, ever the paragon of professional composure, offered a clinical timeline of Sir Reginald's health that day. "I saw Sir Reginald for a brief routine check-up earlier that afternoon," he stated, his voice precise. "Found him, as I noted in my records, in his usual robust but somewhat irritable health. Nothing remarkable. His cardiac issues, as you know, were minor, well managed." He reiterated his certainty about the heart attack as the primary cause, dismissing any notion of foul play with an almost dismissive wave of his hand. "And did Sir Reginald voice any complaints that evening, Doctor?" Poirot inquired, his eyes sharp. "Even a trivial headache, a slight chill, a discomfort after his supper?" Dr. Finch shook his head. "No, Monsieur Poirot, perfectly himself when last seen, aside from his usual, shall we say, brusque disposition." "And you left shortly after dinner, I believe?" Hastings asked. "You didn't stay late?" "No, Captain. My duties were concluded," Finch replied. "I retired to my own residence shortly after the family left the dining room." Finally, Poirot turned to Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. She was a woman of unwavering loyalty to Lady Eleanor, and a repository of the Manor's unspoken history. Her answers were sparse, delivered with a quiet dignity, but held the weight of long years of observation. "The master had his routine, sir," Mrs. Gable stated, her hands clasped. "Set as a clock he was." She confirmed the family's presence in the drawing-room after dinner, the general atmosphere of quiet tension that often accompanied Sir Reginald's presence. "Arguments, yes, they were common enough, but I kept to my duties." And it was in this routine that Poirot found the bedrock of his reconstruction. Mrs. Gable, without prompting, detailed Sir Reginald's unwavering habits. Every evening, precisely at 10 o'clock, I would take him his chamomile tea to the drawing-room. Always the same cup, same amount of honey. She paused, her gaze distant. After his tea, he would rise and go to the main hall. He always liked to check the lights were off, and the big front door securely locked and bolted for the night. A habit of his, ever since I remember, and then— Her eyes drifted towards the grand staircase. Then he would go up to bed, always taking the steps at a deliberate, measured pace, and always gripping the banister firmly with his right hand as he went up. This rigid sequence of actions, repeated night after night for decades, provided Poirot with a fixed timeline and set of parameters for the fatal moment. He re-examined the layout of the hall, the position of the locks, the exact number of steps on the staircase. He pictured Sir Reginald, a creature of habit, performing these actions with unwavering precision. Every detail, however minute, became a potential piece of the puzzle. The apparent consistency of the various accounts, the well-worn narrative of the accident, began to feel less like natural memory and more like a collective, subconscious effort to maintain a fragile peace, a peace that Poirot was now determined to shatter. Hastings, noting Poirot's intense focus on these routines, scribbled furiously in his notebook, sensing that these seemingly mundane details held the key to the entire mystery, the coded confession. The following morning, after a breakfast that was, in true Poirot fashion, meticulously observed rather than merely consumed, Lady Eleanor Montrose led the detective and Hastings to a small private sitting room off the main library. The room felt untouched by time, still imbued with the scent of old leather and dried lavender. Here, with trembling hands, she presented Poirot with the piece of parchment, the very one that had shattered her long-held, if fragile, peace. "It is, as I told you, Monsieur Poirot," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, as she handed him the folded paper. Sir Reginald's hand, undeniably. And this code. He used it sometimes for financial notations, things he wished to keep utterly private. I remember him chuckling over it, saying it was his own little game. Her expression was one of profound disturbance, a mixture of dread and a desperate need for the truth. Poirot accepted the parchment with the reverence of an archaeologist handling a priceless artifact. It was a small rectangle, perhaps no larger than his palm, folded and creased from its long concealment. The script was indeed Sir Reginald's, precise and angular, yet the words were arranged in a seemingly nonsensical sequence of letters and numbers. "A little game, madame," Poirot mused aloud, his thumb caressing the aged paper. "Perhaps. But some games, alas, have very serious stakes, n'est-ce pas?" He turned the parchment over, inspecting its texture. "And this was found, you say, secreted away? Not merely misplaced?" Lady Eleanor nodded, deep within the lining of an antique desk drawer in Sir Reginald's old study. Young Mr. Finch, the archivist, only discovered it yesterday. He was quite shocked when he realized it wasn't just blank paper. "And your initial attempt to decipher it, madame?" Poirot prompted. "You recall the fragments you mentioned?" "Oh, yes," she sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "Secure, leverage, and my hold. Horrid words, really. Not at all what one expects to find from one's husband." Her voice faltered. It made me feel, cold. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, murmured, "It looks like gibberish to me, Poirot. Are you sure you can make sense of it?"
Fear not, Hastings. The human mind, even a convoluted one like Sir Reginald's, leaves its patterns, Poirot replied, producing his small, elegant notebook and a sharpened pencil. For the next hour, the room was filled with the soft scratching of lead on paper, punctuated only by the occasional sigh from Lady Eleanor, or the rustle of Hastings shifting in his armchair. Poirot's brow furrowed in concentration, his little grey cells working with furious, silent energy. He recognized the basic principles of Sir Reginald's code, a relatively straightforward substitution cipher mingled with a rudimentary numerical shift. But it was the context, the mind behind the cipher, that truly guided him. He knew Sir Reginald's nature, his need for control, his meticulous record-keeping, his enjoyment of holding power over others. This understanding illuminated the path through the cryptic jumble.
Slowly, methodically, the nonsense dissolved, and the chilling truth began to emerge. Poirot's expression grew graver with each line he transcribed. What had initially seemed a mere fragment of a coded note was in fact a succinct, hurried communication. It was not a confession of fear, as Lady Eleanor might have initially surmised, nor a warning of a threat to Sir Reginald himself. No, it was far more unsettling. After a long silence, Poirot finally set down his pencil, a grave expression on his face. He held the parchment away from him as if it contained a palpable chill. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, more to himself than to them. The man was a connoisseur of cruelty, it seems.
Hastings, ever impatient, leaned forward. "Have you got it, Poirot? What does it say?"
Poirot looked up, his face grim. "Madame, what you have found here is not a warning of danger to Sir Reginald. It is the declaration of a man utterly certain of his power, utterly satisfied." He then read the transcribed message aloud, his voice low and solemn. "The leverage is absolute. Coded symbol for individual will comply. Reputation secure. My hold unbreakable. The game is finally mine, about to confront." Lady Eleanor gasped, a small choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. "Absolute leverage? My hold unbreakable? He meant he was tormenting someone, wasn't he? Not afraid of them, but gloating?" "Precisely, madame," Poirot confirmed. "This is not the testament of a man afraid. It is the declaration of a man utterly certain of his power, utterly satisfied." He tapped the parchment. "This game of his, as you termed it, was far from innocent. It confirms beyond doubt that Sir Reginald had uncovered a devastating secret about someone close to the family, a secret so profound that it could ruin their reputation, shatter their fortunes, and utterly dismantle their standing in society."
Hastings shifted uncomfortably. Good heavens! He was blackmailing them then, and rather enjoying it, by the sound of it.
"More than enjoying it, Hastings," Poirot clarified, his gaze sharp. He revelled in the demonstration of his control. This unbreakable hold, this game finally mine. It speaks to a profound satisfaction in wielding absolute power over another's life. And the final phrase, about to confront, madame, it tells us that he intended to press his advantage. He was about to deliver the final, crushing blow. This revelation was seismic. It did not merely suggest foul play, it shrieked it. It immediately and irrevocably shifted the entire perspective of Sir Reginald's death from a tragic accident to a meticulously planned, deliberate murder. The heart attack, the stumble, the fall, all now appeared as a carefully constructed tableau designed to conceal a far darker truth. Lady Eleanor gasped, a small, choked sound, as the full, chilling implication settled over her. The ghost of doubt she had carried for 15 years was now a roaring, undeniable presence. Poirot had his starting point, a confirmation of the malice that had long festered beneath the perfectly polished surface of Montrose Manor. The doctor's complicity. With the chilling words of Sir Reginald's coded note echoing in his mind, Poirot's gaze, sharpened by the certainty of murder, began to settle with increasing intensity upon Dr. Alistair Finch. The physician, outwardly the picture of unflappable competence and professional integrity, now presented a different kind of puzzle to Poirot. He was the one who had certified the death, who had confirmed the heart attack, and who had so calmly dismissed any suggestion of foul play. This perfect composure, which had initially struck Poirot as merely an aspect of the doctor's disciplined nature, now seemed like a meticulously constructed barrier. Poirot did not accuse, he observed, he questioned. But his questions to other members of the household, to Mrs. Gable, and even to Lady Eleanor herself, now carried a subtle shift, like a magnifying glass moving across a surface to bring a specific detail into sharper focus. "Tell me, Lady Eleanor," Poirot inquired one afternoon as they sat by a roaring fire. "Dr. Finch has been with the family for many years, has he not? A long and esteemed career, I gather." "Oh yes, Monsieur Poirot," Lady Eleanor confirmed. "Alistair has been our family doctor since before Marcus was born, a truly dedicated man. Though," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "he did have a rather difficult patch early on, before he became so well established. Nothing I ever knew details of, you understand, but there were whispers." Hastings, jotting notes, looked up. "Whispers? Of what nature, Lady Eleanor, if you recall?"
"Merely professional difficulties, Captain. Nothing that ever quite came to light, as far as I know," she replied evasively.
Poirot sought out Mrs. Gable, ostensibly to inquire about the manor's maintenance, but subtly steered the conversation. "Dr. Finch seems a pillar of the community now, Mrs. Gable. Was he always so respected?" The housekeeper, polishing a silver frame, paused. "He is now, sir. But there was a time, many years ago, when folk wondered if he'd make it. A bad case it was. A patient. Well, it wasn't handled right, they said. But Sir Reginald, he stood by Dr. Finch, spoke up for him, saw him through it." Her expression was unreadable, but a faint stiffness in her posture spoke volumes. "Indeed," Poirot murmured, filing away the crucial piece of information. "Sir Reginald, a man of such exacting standards, to show such leniency? That is most intriguing, Mrs. Gable." He knew Sir Reginald gave nothing for free. Through these discreet inquiries, made with the utmost subtlety so as not to stir undue suspicion, Poirot began to uncover a hidden vulnerability in Dr. Finch's past. It was a well-guarded secret, buried deep beneath years of exemplary service and professional reputation. Poirot deduced that many years ago, early in his medical practice, Dr. Finch had made a severe medical error, perhaps a misdiagnosis, a flawed procedure, or an oversight that had led to grave consequences for a patient. It was a mistake that, if exposed, would not only have shattered his nascent career, but could have led to professional ruin, legal repercussions, and public disgrace. This was the chink in Dr. Finch's armour, the fatal flaw that Sir Reginald Montrose had, with his characteristic ruthlessness, unearthed. Sir Reginald, a man who relished control, had discovered this dark secret. He hadn't exposed Finch, no, that wasn't Sir Reginald's way. Instead, he had chosen to use it. Poirot pieced together the insidious nature of Sir Reginald's blackmail. It wasn't just about financial extortion, it was far more personal, far more cruel. Sir Reginald had not merely held the secret over the doctor's head, he had actively used it to dominate him. He had taken a sadistic pleasure in holding Dr. Finch's professional reputation and personal security entirely in his hands. He had delighted in the doctor's quiet subservience, in the knowledge that this respected figure, this man of science and rectitude, was utterly beholden to him. Sir Reginald's coded note, with its emphasis on leverage and my hold, now took on a chilling new dimension when applied to the doctor. He didn't just possess power, he revelled in demonstrating it, making Dr. Finch subtly, constantly aware of the sword of Damocles hanging over his head. For many years, Dr. Finch had lived under this unseen tyranny. Every precise movement, every composed expression, every impeccable diagnosis had been a performance, a desperate effort to maintain the illusion of control while living in terror of Sir Reginald. The patriarch's whims became the doctor's commands, his demands unspoken but keenly felt. It was a psychological prison, a gilded cage built by Sir Reginald's cruel enjoyment of power. From Poirot's perspective, this meant Sir Reginald's death, far from being a tragic accident, was the ultimate liberation for Dr. Finch. It was the sudden, unexpected shattering of the cage, the ultimate escape from a constant, humiliating torment. Sir Reginald's supposed heart attack on the staircase had not only ended the patriarch's life, but had simultaneously freed Dr. Finch from this constant torment, releasing him from a blackmailer who delighted in his suffering. The motive, Poirot realized with a quiet certainty, was now terrifyingly clear and utterly compelling. A memory and a question. The crisp winter air outside Montrose Manor was a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere within, where the weight of a 15-year-old secret pressed down on everyone. Poirot, ever the orchestrator of subtle revelations, had called for another reconstruction of Sir Reginald's final evening. He insisted on the precision of a stage play, guiding each participant through their movements, their spoken words, the very placement of objects. Lady Eleanor, frail but focused, sat quietly in the drawing-room as Mrs. Gable demonstrated the bringing of the tea, Marcus recalled his position by the fireplace, and Camilla illustrated her quiet exit. Hastings, meanwhile, meticulously observed each detail, noting Poirot's keen focus. "Now, madam," Poirot addressed Lady Eleanor, his voice soft yet commanding attention, "let us revisit the period just before 10 o'clock. Sir Reginald would have been in this very room, correct? Perhaps engaged in conversation, perhaps reading." Lady Eleanor nodded slowly, her gaze distant, lost in the past. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, he would sit in his favourite armchair by the fire, just there, often reading his financial papers, or sometimes just observing. He was a man who observed much." "And his health, madame?" Poirot continued, his tone conversational. "Beyond the general brusqueness that seems to have been his nature, did he complain of anything specific that evening? A chill, perhaps? A slight indigestion from dinner?"
Lady Eleanor frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Not that I recall, Monsieur Poirot. He rarely complained. He was a strong man, despite his age. Strong-willed, certainly." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the room, then back to the armchair where her husband once sat. A faint flicker of recognition crossed her face, a fleeting shadow of memory.
"Wait," she murmured, a hand rising to her temple. "There was something Dr. Finch had prescribed. It comes to me now as if from a dream." Her eyes widened slightly, the fog of years beginning to lift. "Yes, in the months leading up to that night. He had been taking some drops." Poirot's interest, previously keen, now sharpened to an almost imperceptible point. "Drops, madame?" "What sort of drops?" he prompted, gently, leaning forward. "For his heart, I believe," Lady Eleanor said, her voice growing more certain with the retrieval of the detail. "Dr. Finch called them soft heart drops." "For his occasional palpitations," he said. "Nothing serious, just a mild tonic to regulate the rhythm," I recall him saying. "Sir Reginald would take them usually in the evening after his tea or before retiring. He was very particular about his medicines, even the mild ones." "And you saw him take these drops regularly?" Poirot questioned, his gaze unblinking. "Not every evening, no," Lady Eleanor clarified, "but frequently enough." He kept the small bottle on his bedside table, I think. Or sometimes, if he felt a particular flutter, as he called it, Dr. Finch would administer them directly during his visits. She looked towards the grand staircase. That night, I don't recall seeing him take them, but it was certainly part of the routine at that period of his life. Hastings, who had been listening intently, leaned towards Poirot. Soft heart drops, Poirot. Could they be significant? Perhaps they reacted with something. Poirot gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Ah, Hastings, that is precisely the question that springs to mind. A prescribed tonic, taken regularly. This offers us a pathway. He allowed himself a small, thoughtful frown. A fall, you see, especially for a man of Sir Reginald's habits, gripping the banister as he did, seems disproportionate to a simple heart attack. Unless, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, unless the heart attack was but a symptom of something else, something introduced. You mean, someone might have given him something, Poirot, but what? And how would they know it would cause a fall like that? Hastings pressed, his brow furrowed in concentration. Poirot held up a hand, a gesture for silence. Ah, Hastings, that is precisely the question, and for that one needs not merely opportunity, but a very particular kind of knowledge. The knowledge of the physician, perhaps? His gaze drifted, almost imperceptibly, towards the door through which Dr. Finch had recently exited after his reconstruction. The simple recall of soft heart drops had shifted the entire landscape of the investigation. No longer was it merely about a fall or a sudden ailment. It was now about precision, about chemistry, about a deadly understanding of the human body. The accident, Poirot was beginning to suspect, had been nothing of the sort. It had been an exquisitely planned event, using the very tools of healing to achieve a far darker purpose. And the key, he felt certain, lay hidden in the medical knowledge of the man who had certified the death. The doctor's knowledge a trap at the dinner table. The setting was perfect. Later that evening, the Montrose family, along with Dr. Finch, gathered in the comfortable drawing-room after dinner, the scent of wood smoke mingling with rich coffee. Hastings, quite oblivious to the intricate web Poirot was spinning, found the atmosphere almost convivial, a welcome respite from the earlier tension. But Poirot, though partaking in the rituals of after-dinner coffee, was far from relaxed. His little grey cells were poised, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The conversation drifted, as it often did in country houses, from local gossip to current affairs before Poirot smoothly, almost imperceptibly, steered it. "Ah, Doctor," Poirot began, turning his head slightly towards Dr. Finch, who sat, precise as ever, sipping his coffee. "I was just recalling a most curious case from my past, involving, as it happened, a rather unfortunate misunderstanding of herbal remedies." Dr. Finch adjusted his spectacles, a flicker of professional interest in his eyes. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot? Herbalism, while not my specialty, often presents fascinating anomalies. Quackery, sometimes, but anomalies nonetheless." "Precisely so," Poirot exclaimed, a twinkle in his eye that Hastings knew masked a deeper purpose. This concerned a gentleman of a certain age who suffered from what he called flutters of the heart. Harmless, you understand, merely a nervous disposition. His wife, a most well-meaning woman, insisted he take a strong infusion of, let us say, valerian root each evening for its calming properties. Quite potent, apparently. "Valerian can be quite soporific, yes," Dr. Finch conceded, a faint hint of superiority in his voice. "Though one must be cautious with dosage, of course. For cardiac patients, it is generally benign." "Ah, but here is the peculiarity," Poirot continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, as if sharing a delightful secret. "This gentleman, after several weeks of this routine, suffered a most violent collapse, a sudden disorientation, dizziness, then a complete loss of consciousness, leading to a fall. The local doctor, a good man I am sure, attributed it to a purely natural heart failure. But my investigations..." while they suggested something else entirely. Poirot paused, letting the silence hang. He then delivered his deliberate inaccuracy, carefully crafted to prod a man of Dr. Finch's precise medical knowledge. I came to believe, you see, that the valerian, while harmless in itself, had, over time, somehow accumulated in the gentleman's system. And then one evening, perhaps reacting with something he ate, or perhaps merely reaching a critical mass, it caused a sort of systemic paralysis, a complete shutdown of the nervous system, leaving him utterly helpless before he fell. Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's theatricality, nodded sagely, though he secretly wondered if Poirot wasn't stretching the facts a bit. Camilla looked intrigued. Marcus, ever practical, simply raised an eyebrow. But Dr. Finch stiffened. A barely perceptible frown creased his forehead, and his usually composed hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Systemic paralysis, Monsieur Poirot?" Dr. Finch's voice was remarkably even, but the slight tightening around his eyes was not lost on the detective. "With all due respect, while valerian can affect the central nervous system, and accumulation is a theoretical possibility with some substances, such as dramatic, sudden, and complete paralysis leading to a fall of that nature, it is highly improbable for valerian alone." "Extremely so, in fact." Poirot offered a humble shrug. "Ah, the intricacies of the human body, eh, Doctor?" Always baffling the poor detective.
Dr. Finch, now fully engaged and compelled by his professional pride to correct what he clearly saw as a medical fallacy, leaned forward. "No, Monsieur Poirot, it is not baffling when one understands the pharmacology. Such symptoms, sudden profound dizziness, disorientation, followed by a rapid collapse in a cardiac patient, while mimicking a heart attack, suggests something far more acute than valerian. One would consider perhaps a substance with a very specific, rapid effect on the central nervous system or the circulatory system, perhaps even a vasodilator or a potent hypertensive agent that could induce a sudden, dramatic drop in blood pressure, leading to syncope and a fall, especially if interacting with existing cardiac medication, something that works quickly then metabolizes rapidly, leaving little trace." He continued, his voice taking on the didactic tone of a lecturer, oblivious to the trap he was walking into. "There are certain alkaloids, even some obscure plant extracts, that in precise doses could achieve such an effect. They cause a momentary, overwhelming sensation of vertigo, a profound weakness, enough to disorient a man utterly just as he puts weight on a step. A healthy man might recover, but an older gentleman with a flutter, as you put it, such a swift, severe drop in cerebral blood flow combined with a fall could very easily trigger a fatal cardiac event, or simply kill him outright without visible trauma beyond the impact of the fall." Dr. Finch paused, seemingly satisfied with his correction, a faint flush of pride on his cheeks. "One would have to know precisely what medication the patient was on, of course, and the exact properties of the remedy in question. But a systemic paralysis from valerian? No, Monsieur Poirot, that is not medically sound." Poirot simply smiled, a small, knowing smile that went unnoticed by the doctor, whose attention was now drawn to Marcus offering him more coffee. The trap had been sprung, and the results were exquisite. Dr. Finch, in his eagerness to demonstrate his superior medical knowledge, had inadvertently revealed not only his deep understanding of acute physiological effects, but also a chillingly specific knowledge of precisely how to induce a fatal accident that mimicked natural causes, leaving virtually no evidence behind. He had, in his own words, detailed the very method Poirot had begun to suspect. The soft heart drops now took on a terrifying significance, for they were the key to knowing exactly how to destabilize Sir Reginald's already vulnerable system. The final piece of the puzzle, the precise, had just clicked into place. The method revealed. The drawing-room, once a stage for polite social interaction, now felt charged with the silent hum of deduction. Dr. Finch had unwittingly laid bare a crucial piece of the puzzle, and Poirot's little grey cells were working with exhilarating speed. He sat for a moment, eyes half closed, processing the doctor's precise,
almost too eager correction. Hastings, ever a faithful barometer of Poirot's inner state, noticed the subtle change in his friend's demeanour. "You've got something, haven't you, Poirot?" Hastings ventured, unable to contain his curiosity. "That performance with the valerian? It worked, didn't it?" Finch gave something away. "Ah, Hastings, you are learning. Indeed, the good doctor has provided us with a most illuminating lecture. Not on herbal remedies, perhaps, but on the potential for medical manipulation," Poirot replied, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He rose and began to pace the room, a familiar habit when his thoughts coalesced. "Consider, my friend," Poirot began, addressing Hastings directly, "what the doctor specified. Not a paralysis, no, but a sudden drop in blood pressure, a profound dizziness, a disorientation. And all this, remember, in an elderly gentleman with mild palpitations. A convenient existing condition, was it not?" Hastings frowned, tracing the lines on the Persian rug with his toe. "So you think Finch didn't just give him a heart attack, but made him feel like he was having one, caused him to fall?" "Precisely," Poirot beamed, pausing before the grand staircase. "The fall, Hastings, was not the cause of death, but the intended outcome of a carefully orchestrated physical incapacitation. It was the murder weapon disguised as an accident. And the weapon itself, a substance known to Dr. Finch, acquired from his medical knowledge, not some clumsy, recently purchased poison from a dusty old book." Poirot turned back to Hastings, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The key, my friend, the veritable key, lies in Lady Eleanor's memory of the soft heart drops. Dr. Finch prescribed them. He knew precisely what Sir Reginald was putting into his system, innocently, for his mild palpitations." "But how does that connect?" Hastings pressed, eager to follow the intricate logic. "The drops were harmless, weren't they?"
In themselves, perhaps, yes, Poirot confirmed. But consider this. What if Dr. Finch introduced another substance, one that, when combined with those very drops, created a deadly interaction? A carefully chosen compound, perhaps one that rapidly amplifies the drop's effects or creates a sudden, overwhelming physiological response that mimics a natural collapse. Something that would pass undetected in a standard post-mortem examination, especially when the death was already attributed to a natural heart issue.
Poirot then painted the picture, his words meticulous, chilling in their precision. The true method was this. Dr. Finch, leveraging his trusted position as the family physician, had the perfect opportunity. Sir Reginald, rigid in his routine, would have trusted his doctor implicitly with his health. Finch could have administered a precise, pre-calculated dose of this chosen substance. Not into the chamomile tea that Mrs. Gable so faithfully prepared. No, that would be too risky, too obvious if someone else tasted it or witnessed the tampering. "Then how?" Hastings interjected, a slight frown creasing his brow. "He couldn't just force him to take it." "Ah, but that is where the soft heart drops, and Sir Reginald's minor ailments become so crucial," Poirot explained. "Sir Reginald often had a slight indigestion after dinner, perhaps, or complained of a restless night. Dr. Finch, during one of his seemingly innocuous evening visits, perhaps a check-up or to offer a digestive aid, would simply have offered Sir Reginald a new tonic or an improved form of the drops. A small, palatable liquid. Or perhaps a tiny, easily swallowed pill disguised as a common remedy. Sir Reginald, precise as he was, would have taken it without question, believing it to be for his well-being. Poirot's voice became almost a murmur, laden with the weight of his deduction. The substance Finch chose would be fast-acting, designed to induce that sudden, severe dizziness or overwhelming disorientation precisely after Sir Reginald had finished his tea, checked the hall, and began his ascent of the grand staircase. Not a moment before, not a moment after. The timing, you see, Hastings, would be everything, a calculation of staggering coldness and precision.
Hastings shuddered. So he didn't just push him. He poisoned him, knowing it would make him fall. And it would look like an accident because of his existing heart problem. That's... That's diabolical. Precisely, my friend, Poirot agreed, a grim satisfaction settling over his features. The very definition. The soft heart drops were not merely a detail, they were the key to knowing exactly how to destabilize Sir Reginald's already vulnerable system to create the perfect illusion. A murder designed to be medically indistinguishable from a natural event.
The pieces of the puzzle now clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The coded note from Sir Reginald, boasting of his unbreakable hold, Dr. Finch's chillingly specific knowledge of acute physiological effects revealed during their innocent-seeming conversation, and now the terrifyingly simple yet utterly sophisticated method of murder. Sir Reginald's fall, deemed an unfortunate accident for 15 years, was, in Poirot's eyes, nothing less than an exquisitely engineered descent into death. The final piece, a calculated act. The drawing-room, previously a stage for subtle conversational traps, now served as the chamber where the truth of a 15-year-old murder began to assemble itself, piece by chilling piece. Poirot stood by the unlit fireplace, his fingertips pressed together, his eyes almost closed as he wove together the strands of evidence. Sir Reginald's coded note, Lady Eleanor's forgotten detail about the soft heart drops, and Dr. Finch's unwitting revelation during their discussion on poisons. "It is all very clear now, Hastings," Poirot declared, opening his eyes and fixing his gaze on his friend. "The final piece, she has fallen into place with a most dreadful precision." Hastings, who had been observing Poirot's profound concentration, nodded slowly. "You mean the doctor, don't you? Finch? But how exactly? And why now, after all these years?" "Ah, the why is perhaps the most compelling of all, my friend," Poirot replied, beginning a slow, deliberate pace across the carpet. "Consider, Hastings, the nature of Sir Reginald's control. It was not merely blackmail for money, no. Lady Eleanor's deciphered note spoke of leverage and my hold, and the game is finally mine. And Dr. Finch's past, a severe medical error, a career-ending secret that Sir Reginald discovered." Poirot paused, turning to face Hastings directly. "Imagine, then, the life of Dr. Finch for 15 long years. Every day, every interaction with Sir Reginald, he lived under the shadow of exposure. Sir Reginald Hastings would have delighted in this power. He would have taken a positively sadistic satisfaction in holding the good doctor's professional reputation, his very livelihood, his social standing, utterly in his hands. It would not be enough for Sir Reginald merely to possess the secret. He would twist the knife, subtly, constantly. A cutting remark, a demanding request, a reminder of past favours, all designed to make Dr. Finch acutely aware of his utter subservience, a torment far worse than simple financial extortion." Hastings winced. "Good heavens, a kind of psychological torture." "Precisely," Poirot affirmed. "And only one thing could end that torment, Sir Reginald's death. This was not a sudden burst of temper, Hastings. This was a liberation, meticulously planned and executed by a man pushed to his absolute limit." Poirot continued, his voice gaining in quiet intensity. Dr. Finch, being the family physician, possessed two invaluable assets: intimate medical knowledge of Sir Reginald's physiology, his mild palpitations, his overall health, and unique access to his person under the guise of care. He was the trusted healer, therefore above suspicion. "So he used that access to give him something?" Hastings queried, his expression grim. "Indeed," Poirot confirmed. He knew Sir Reginald's meticulous nightly routine, confirmed by Mrs. Gable, his precise timing, and you knew of his soft heart drops, the very drops you prescribed. He leveraged his medical knowledge to find a compound that, perhaps in combination with those drops or simply by itself, would induce this sudden incapacitation. He administered it to him, did he not? Disguised as a routine tonic, a new, improved drop for his palpitations, just before he began his nightly ascent of this very staircase. "Then how?" Hastings interjected, a slight frown creasing his brow. "He couldn't just force him to take it." Ah, but that is where the soft heart drops, and Sir Reginald's minor ailments become so crucial, Poirot explained. Sir Reginald often had a slight indigestion after dinner, perhaps, or complained of a restless night. Dr. Finch, during one of his seemingly innocuous evening visits, perhaps a check-up or to offer a digestive aid, would simply have offered Sir Reginald a new tonic or an improved form of the drops. A small, palatable liquid, or perhaps a tiny, easily swallowed pill disguised as a common remedy. Sir Reginald, precise as he was, would have taken it without question, believing it to be for his well-being. Poirot's voice became almost a murmur, laden with the weight of his deduction. The substance Finch chose would be fast-acting, designed to induce that sudden, severe dizziness or overwhelming disorientation precisely after Sir Reginald had finished his tea, checked the hall, and began his ascent of the grand staircase. Not a moment before, not a moment after. The timing, you see, Hastings, would be everything, a calculation of staggering coldness and precision. Hastings shuddered. So he didn't just push him, he poisoned him, knowing it would make him fall, and it would look like an accident because of his existing heart problem. That's diabolical. Precisely, my friend, Poirot agreed, a grim satisfaction settling over his features. The very definition. The soft heart drops were not merely a detail. They were the key to knowing exactly how to destabilize Sir Reginald's already vulnerable system to create the perfect illusion, a murder designed to be medically indistinguishable from a natural event. The pieces of the puzzle now clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The coded note from Sir Reginald, boasting of his unbreakable hold, Dr. Finch's chillingly specific knowledge of acute physiological effects revealed during their innocent-seeming conversation. And now the terrifyingly simple, yet utterly sophisticated method of murder. Sir Reginald's fall, deemed an unfortunate accident for 15 years, was, in Poirot's eyes, nothing less than an exquisitely engineered descent into death. The conclave of truth. The summons from Hercule Poirot had arrived for each member of the Montrose household with an almost palpable weight. They were to gather in the main hall at precisely 8 o'clock that evening. The air outside was still, cold, and heavy with the promise of more snow, a fitting reflection of the atmosphere inside the grand manor. As the clock in the hall chimed the hour, each individual took their place, drawn by an invisible thread of dread. Lady Eleanor, pale but resolute, sat on a velvet settee, her eyes fixed on Poirot. Marcus stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Camilla perched on the edge of a delicate chair, her usual composure fractured, her fingers nervously twisting a silk scarf. Dr. Alistair Finch, however, remained outwardly impeccable, standing a little apart, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression a carefully neutral mask. Inspector Davies, a man of stolid presence whom Poirot had seen briefly earlier, now stood by the imposing front door, his very stillness adding to the unbearable tension. Poirot surveyed them all, his gaze moving slowly from face to face. He stood directly beneath the grand staircase, its polished banisters gleaming in the soft lamplight, a silent, majestic witness to the events of 15 years past. Captain Hastings stood loyally by his friend's side, feeling the oppressive weight of unspoken expectation. The air was thick, heavy with the unacknowledged suspicion that had simmered beneath the surface of Montrose Manor for so long. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice surprisingly soft, yet it resonated through the vast hall, instantly commanding absolute silence. "I have asked you to gather here this evening, in this particular spot, not for comfort, but for clarity, for truth." He paused, letting his words settle. For many years, the official story of Sir Reginald Montrose's death has been one of tragic accident, a heart attack, a stumble, a fatal fall, a most unfortunate incident, regrettable but devoid of malice. Is that not so, Dr. Finch? Dr. Finch met his gaze. "That is precisely what the evidence and my medical findings indicated, Monsieur Poirot. It was a clear case of cardiac arrest followed by an accidental fall." Poirot gave a slow, deliberate nod. Indeed, and for 15 years that narrative has stood, but a narrative, however well established, does not always reflect the reality, and the reality, mes amis, is often far more complex and far more sinister than the comfortable lie.
He took a small step forward, his voice gaining in quiet intensity. Lady Eleanor, in her remarkable courage, has discovered a piece of evidence that disproves this comfortable lie entirely. A coded note written by Sir Reginald himself just before his demise. A note that speaks not of fear, but of triumph, of leverage, of an unbreakable hold, of a game finally mine. A collective gasp rippled through the small assembly. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with apprehension. Marcus clenched his jaw, his gaze darting from Poirot to Dr. Finch. Camilla's brittle composure seemed to visibly crack.
"What does this mean, Monsieur Poirot?" Marcus demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "Are you suggesting—" Poirot's eyes, bright and unblinking, fixed upon the assembled faces. "I am not merely suggesting, Monsieur Montrose. I am stating, with the full conviction of my little grey cells, that what transpired on this very staircase 15 years ago was not an accident. It was not a sudden act of God. It was a murder, a meticulously planned and executed act."
A stunned silence fell, thicker than the snow outside. Hastings felt a shiver run down his spine, a familiar chill of awe and dread whenever Poirot delivered such pronouncements. He watched the faces in the room, particularly Dr. Finch's, for the slightest tremor, the telltale flicker behind the mask. The doctor's face remained impassive, but Poirot could almost feel the tension radiating from him.
"Murder?" Camilla whispered, her voice barely audible, clutching her scarf to her throat. "But who?" Poirot's gaze held hers for a moment before sweeping across the room once more, taking in each face, allowing the enormity of his declaration to settle. "That, mademoiselle, is precisely what we are here to uncover, the truth of who extinguished the life of Sir Reginald Montrose and the carefully concealed method by which they did so." The stage was set, the audience captive, and Poirot, the master dramatist, was ready to draw back the final curtain. Dispelling false trails. The pronouncement of murder hung heavy in the air of Montrose Manor's main hall, shattering the decorum that had governed the family for years. Marcus, Camilla, and even Lady Eleanor visibly recoiled from the word, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning apprehension. Dr. Finch, alone, maintained his unnerving stillness, though Poirot felt a subtle tightening in the atmosphere around him. Poirot allowed the silence to linger, letting the truth sink in. Then he turned his attention first to the two children of the house, his expression softening subtly, a hint of genuine understanding in his eyes. "We must proceed methodically, mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear. "When a death is discovered, particularly one now revealed as murder, the first thoughts often turn to those closest. Those who might have benefited, those who might have harboured resentments." He looked directly at Marcus Montrose, whose arms remained tightly crossed over his chest. "Monsieur Marcus, your relationship with your father was, by your own admission, fraught. We have spoken of the vigorous discussions over the estate, the clashes of will. Sir Reginald, if I may be so blunt, was a man who imposed his will, was he not? A man who would have found pleasure in frustrating your desires, in asserting his absolute authority even over your own future." Marcus's jaw tightened. "He believed he knew best, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice clipped. "In everything, even my own life, it was suffocating. He never truly let go of the reins, even as I grew older." "A heavy burden, indeed," Poirot acknowledged, "to live under such a shadow. And on that very evening, a particular clash, was there not? You were in the library, dealing with ledgers, when you spoke of your father."
"We had argued earlier, yes," Marcus confirmed, his gaze unwavering. "He had refused a proposal I made for the estate's development, categorically. He called my ideas reckless and presumptuous."
You wished for freedom, perhaps, Monsieur Marcus? Freedom from his perpetual oversight? Poirot pressed gently. Marcus looked away for a moment, then back at Poirot, a flicker of raw emotion in his eyes. More than anything, to be my own man, to make my own decisions for Montrose. Yes, I admit it. I wished he would step aside. Hastings, observing Marcus's strained confession, interjected, "It sounds like a strong motive, Poirot. He certainly had reason to want his father out of the way." Poirot gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head before turning his gaze to Camilla Montrose, who seemed to shrink slightly under his scrutiny, though her chin remained defiantly high. "And Mademoiselle Camilla, your conversations with your father, too, often revolved around his control. Your social engagements, your personal choices. He sought to dictate, did he not?" Camilla's composure, already fragile, seemed to crack slightly. "He sought to control everything," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Every friendship, every ball, every word I spoke. He saw my life as an extension of his own reputation. It was stifling, Monsieur Poirot, insufferable. I often wished to simply disappear." "And you too had a sharp word with him that evening?" Poirot inquired, his tone sympathetic. "Yes," Camilla admitted, a flush rising in her cheeks. "He had forbidden me from attending a particular social gathering, called it beneath the Montrose name. I admit I was furious. I told him he had no right to dictate my life. It was a foolish outburst, perhaps, but I was truly at my wits' end." Hastings, still thinking of motive, frowned. "It sounds as though both Marcus and Camilla had very strong motives, Poirot. A desire to be free, a deep resentment, and both argued with him that night. Isn't that rather incriminating?" Poirot held up a hand. "On the surface, Hastings, yes. These are indeed the classic motives: resentment, a desire for liberation from tyranny. And the arguments, they undoubtedly occurred. But my dear Hastings, Sir Reginald Montrose was not killed in the heat of passion, struck down by a sudden blow born of a heated argument. No."
He turned back to Marcus and Camilla, his expression now one of profound conviction. The murder of Sir Reginald was not an impulsive act. It was not a sudden lashing out born of the immediate pain of an argument. Your arguments, intense as they were, ended. You both retired. And Sir Reginald, a man who relished confrontation, was left to his own devices, perfectly unharmed, until the final moments of his life. Your actions, Monsieur Marcus, Mademoiselle Camilla, were reactive. You reacted to your father's control, his cruel domination. You wished him gone, yes, a natural human reaction to relentless oppression. But you did not plan his death. You did not orchestrate it with the cold, meticulous precision that was required.
He paused, letting his words sink in. The method by which Sir Reginald died, a medically induced collapse disguised as an accident, required not passion, but patience. Not anger, but a calculating intellect. It required a knowledge of the human body, of specific compounds, and of precise timing that neither of you possesses. You lacked the means, Mademoiselle Camilla, the specific knowledge, Monsieur Marcus, to execute such a subtle and complex crime. Your grievances were profound, your desire for freedom undeniable, but they were not the direct instrument of his demise. Poirot's gaze, though firm, was now devoid of suspicion when he looked at them. Therefore, while you both bore a heavy cross under Sir Reginald's hand, and your desires for his end were understandable, I can state with absolute certainty that neither of you were directly involved in the planning or execution of his murder. Your pain, your resentments were profound, but they did not make you killers in this instance. Marcus let out a long, slow breath, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Camilla, though still trembling, visibly relaxed, tears welling in her eyes as she murmured, "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you." A shared sigh of relief, subtle but palpable, passed between the siblings. They were free, at least, from the immediate cloud of suspicion that had been gathering over them since Poirot's arrival. The true killer, however, remained among them, their name yet unspoken. The doctor's betrayal. A palpable tension filled the great hall after Poirot cleared Marcus and Camilla. The family's collective sigh of relief was quickly replaced by a renewed, suffocating dread. If not them, then who? All eyes, now sharpened by the word murder, turned to Poirot, waiting for the next accusation. Poirot's gaze, piercing and unwavering, slowly pivoted, finally settling on Dr. Alistair Finch. The doctor stood apart, his posture still rigidly correct, but Poirot sensed a subtle shift, a barely perceptible tension in his jaw. Inspector Davies, who had been observing quietly from the doorway, now took a step forward, his presence adding an official, unyielding weight to the atmosphere. "Dr. Finch," Poirot began, his voice calm yet resonating with an almost clinical authority. "You certified Sir Reginald's death as accidental, a cardiac arrest, exacerbated by a fall down this magnificent staircase?" He gestured towards the gleaming banisters. A conclusion accepted by all, including the local authorities, for 15 years. Dr. Finch met his gaze. "It was the truth, Monsieur Poirot. My professional opinion was based on all available evidence and Sir Reginald's medical history." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "And your professional opinion, I am sure, is highly valued. But what of the things that do not appear in a medical report, Doctor? The things that lie hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly impeccable career?" He stepped closer to Finch, his voice dropping slightly, but carrying clearly in the hushed hall. "Doctor, Finch, many years ago, early in your esteemed career, you made a grave medical error, a mistake that, if exposed, would have utterly destroyed your reputation, your livelihood, your entire future. Is this not so?" Dr. Finch's composure flickered, a momentary widening of his eyes, quickly suppressed. I do not know what you are referring to, Monsieur Poirot. My record is unblemished."
"Unblemished to the public eye, perhaps," Poirot countered, his voice gaining in strength. "But not to Sir Reginald Montrose. He discovered your secret, did he not? He found the chink in your armour, the skeleton in your cupboard." "Sir Reginald was a benevolent man. He defended me," Finch retorted, a slight tremor entering his voice for the first time.
"Benevolent?" Poirot scoffed, a rare note of contempt in his tone. "Or merely a connoisseur of cruelty, Doctor? Sir Reginald did not expose you. No, that would have been too simple, too swift. Instead, he chose to blackmail you. For 15 years he held your secret, your professional life, your very existence, utterly in his grasp. He twisted the knife slowly, did he not? Reminding you, subtly, constantly, of his power, of your utter subservience."
He paused, letting the implication hang. "He took a perverse, sadistic pleasure in controlling you, in seeing a respected man like yourself reduced to a terrified subordinate. Every polite smile, every casual conversation was a veiled threat. Your life became a living hell, a constant dread of exposure."
Hastings watched, horrified, as the truth of Finch's torment was laid bare. He saw the doctor's face, now devoid of its usual composure, a mask of desperate denial. "Good heavens, Poirot," he whispered, "this is monstrous." "And then," Poirot continued, his voice now cold, "we come to Sir Reginald's final night, the night he wrote this." Poirot held up the decoded note, its implications now magnified. His final, arrogant boast, "The leverage is absolute, coded symbol for Finch, will comply, my hold unbreakable, the game is finally mine, about to confront." "No!" Dr. Finch finally cried out, a raw, strangled sound. "He was going to expose me. He had found some new detail. He was going to ruin me. After all these years, he was going to expose me to everyone." "Ah, the final, overwhelming motive," Poirot stated, his voice devoid of pity. "He was going to shatter you utterly after years of merely tormenting you. This provided you with the ultimate, desperate motive to act." He then moved to the climax of his explanation, detailing the murder itself. And the method, Doctor? So ingenious, so perfectly suited to a man of your unique knowledge and access. You did not strike him down with brute force. No, that would be far too messy. You used the tools of your own profession, the very trust placed in you. During our conversation the other evening, Doctor, Poirot reminded him, his eyes sparkling with a subtle triumph, when I recounted my rather erroneous theory about valerian, you were quick to correct me, were you not? You spoke with great precision of substances, specific alkaloids perhaps, that could induce a sudden, profound dizziness, a rapid drop in blood pressure, a complete disorientation, leaving a man helpless, and you detailed how such a substance, delivered in a precise dose, would metabolize rapidly, leaving little trace in a standard post-mortem. Dr. Finch's face was ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill of the hall. He knew precisely what Poirot referred to. You knew Sir Reginald's routine, Poirot pressed on, unrelenting, his precise timing, and you knew of his soft heart drops, the very drops you prescribed. You leveraged your medical knowledge to find a compound that perhaps in combination with those drops, or simply by itself, would induce this sudden incapacitation. You administered it to him, did you not? Disguised as a routine tonic, a new improved drop for his palpitations, just before he began his nightly ascent of this very staircase. Poirot gestured, sweeping his hand towards the staircase. The dose was calculated to take effect precisely as he began his climb, to induce that incapacitating dizziness, that momentary lapse of consciousness, just as he gripped this banister, making his fall seem utterly accidental. A fatal fall that would perfectly mimic a natural heart attack. No bruises, no struggle, just the tragic collapse of an ailing man. A perfect crime, meticulously planned, silently executed, and hidden for 15 years beneath the guise of his own well-documented medical condition.
Dr. Finch staggered back a step, his face now a mask of utter despair. The facade had crumbled, leaving behind only the raw, exposed terror of a man finally cornered. Inspector Davies moved forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his truncheon, ready to act. The truth, long buried, had finally come crashing down.
The confession. The great hall was silent, save for the faint creaks of the old house and the rapid, shallow breaths of Dr. Alistair Finch. Poirot had laid out his case with a devastating precision, stripping away 15 years of carefully constructed deception. Finch, who had stood so rigidly a bastion of medical authority, now seemed to shrink within his expensive tweed suit. His earlier attempts at denial, his insistence on a clear conscience, now felt hollow, desperate. "This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot," Dr. Finch finally choked out, his voice hoarse, a stark contrast to his earlier composed tones. "You are twisting facts. Sir Reginald's death was tragic, but it was natural. You have no proof." Poirot merely tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "No proof, Doctor? We have your secret past, known only to Sir Reginald. We have his coded note, detailing his unbreakable hold over you, written moments before his death. We have your own expert explanation of how such a natural collapse can be artificially induced with undetectable substances. And we have the motive, Doctor, the overwhelming motive of a man driven to the very brink of ruin by a tormentor who relished his suffering." Hastings, witnessing the scene unfold, could feel the walls closing in on the doctor. Finch's eyes darted frantically between Poirot's unwavering gaze, Lady Eleanor's sorrowful face, and the impassive, ready stance of Inspector Davies. The meticulous mask of professionalism he had worn for so long began to crack, revealing the raw, terrified man beneath. "He would have exposed me," Finch cried, a desperate, guttural sound that echoed in the silent hall. His hands, which had been clasped so primly behind his back, now clenched into white-knuckled fists. "He was going to tell everyone, my practice, my reputation, everything I had built back. He enjoyed it, Monsieur Poirot. He truly enjoyed seeing me squirm. He made me dance to his tune for years, and now he was going to destroy me."
Tears, hot and sudden, streamed down the doctor's face, carving paths through the dust of his shattered composure. His shoulders slumped, and the carefully maintained posture finally gave way. I couldn't bear it anymore, he sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush. He came to me that night, after his tea. He had a triumphant look, a glint in his eye. He said, "Finch, my dear doctor, I think it's time everyone knew the truth about that little incident, don't you?" He laughed, Monsieur Poirot. He laughed.
The confession, once it began, spilled out in a torrent of anguish and relief. "I had the new vial ready," Finch whispered, his voice trembling. "For his palpitations," I told him. He swallowed it without a second thought. I knew it would take effect on the stairs just as he started to climb. I knew it would look natural. I had to, don't you see? He left me no choice.
The hall remained silent, save for Doctor Finch's broken gasps. Inspector Davies, grim-faced, stepped forward, his hand moving towards Finch's arm. "Doctor, Alistair Finch," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "I am arresting you for the murder of Sir Reginald Montrose." Finch offered no resistance, simply collapsing, a broken man, as Davies took hold of him. The torment had finally ended, not with Sir Reginald's death, but with the full, bitter taste of his own confession.
Justice and fallout. Finch offered no resistance, his body now a hollow shell. He allowed himself to be led away, his footsteps dragging, disappearing into the cold night outside Montrose Manor. Hastings watched him go, a profound sense of unease settling over him. "Good heavens, Poirot," he murmured, "to think he lived among them for 15 years, the family doctor, all this time." "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot replied, his gaze still fixed on the empty doorway where Finch had vanished. The trusted confidant, the healer. It is often the most dangerous position, for who suspects the hand that offers comfort? The revelation of Dr. Finch, a man outwardly respected, a pillar of the community, as a calculated murderer, sent profound shockwaves not only through the Montrose family, but was sure to ripple far beyond the manor walls. Lady Eleanor wept openly, not just for Sir Reginald, but for the shattering of a trust she had held for decades. Marcus and Camilla stood in stunned silence, grappling with the knowledge that their lives had been shaped by a killer living in plain sight. Poirot knew the community would be aghast. Some would condemn Finch outright, others, like Hastings, would find it hard to reconcile the gentle doctor with the cold killer. But there would also be a murmur of unsettling sympathy. The news of Sir Reginald's sadistic nature, his ruthless blackmail, would inevitably leak, painting Finch not just as a murderer, but as a desperate man driven to the brink. The Lord, once seen as merely formidable, would now be exposed as a cruel tormentor, and the doctor a victim of his dark pleasure. The justice served, while necessary, would be complicated by the ugly truth of the tyrant who had forged his own deadly fate. A burden lifted. The silence that followed Dr. Finch's arrest was not one of shock, but of a strange, fragile release. Lady Eleanor, who had openly wept during the confession, now looked up, her tear-stained face etched with both sorrow and an undeniable profound peace. 15 years, she whispered, more to herself than to the room. 15 years of doubt, of wondering if I had missed something, if I should have known. The not knowing. It was a haunting, worse than any ghost. She looked at Poirot, a flicker of gratitude in her weary eyes. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. The truth, however painful, is a kind of liberation. The haunting is gone." Hastings, watching her, felt a pang of understanding. "It must be an enormous weight off her shoulders, Poirot," he remarked softly. "All that uncertainty." Poirot nodded. "Indeed, Hastings, doubt, like a slow poison, can erode the soul more surely than a sudden shock." Marcus, who had stood stiffly through the entire revelation, finally sagged against the fireplace. He looked at his sister, Camilla, and a shared, unspoken understanding passed between them. Their faces, though still stunned by the enormity of the betrayal, held a glimmer of something new: freedom. "He controlled us even after his death, didn't he?" Marcus said, his voice raw. "This house, our lives, everything was still under his shadow, built on the secret he used to break Finch." Camilla nodded, tears now tracing paths down her own cheeks. "We were suffocating under it, Marcus. Not just his tyrannical will, but the unspoken truth of what he was, what he did to people. It permeated everything. We knew something was wrong, but we couldn't name it. Now, ... She trailed off, a shaky breath escaping her. "Now it's out, and perhaps we can truly breathe." They were no longer merely the children of a controlling patriarch. They were survivors of a profound, insidious secret that had tainted their entire lives. The unacknowledged truth, the poisonous undercurrent of Sir Reginald's nature and its hold on Dr. Finch, had now been brutally, unequivocally brought into the light. And in that harsh light, a burden was finally lifted, allowing them to begin, perhaps for the first time, to live lives truly their own. Departure from Montrose Manor. The next morning, a fresh blanket of snow covered the grounds of Montrose Manor, muffling the world in a pristine, deceptive silence. Inside, a different kind of quiet had settled, the quiet of a house from which a great, dark burden had finally been lifted. Poirot and Hastings stood in the grand hall, preparing for their departure. Their luggage sat by the front door, a subtle signal of their imminent farewell, timed perfectly for their return to London on Christmas Eve. Poirot's gaze drifted to the grand staircase, no longer a symbol of an unfortunate mishap, but a stark, silent monument to human desperation and the meticulous precision of evil. He watched a faint shaft of winter sunlight catch the polished banister, the very surface Sir Reginald had gripped in his final drugged moments. "It is quite astonishing, isn't it, Poirot?" Hastings observed, following his friend's gaze. "To think a man could plan something so intricate, then live with it for so long, right under everyone's noses." "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot replied, his gaze still fixed on the staircase. "The human mind is a labyrinth of complexities. But even the most perfectly planned crimes, the most cunningly concealed betrayals, leave a faint whisper. A minute detail, a forgotten soft heart drop, a precisely worded correction at dinner. These are the whispers that my little grey cells are designed to detect." He turned from the staircase, a contemplative look on his face. "This case, Hastings, has been a most profound study in the insidious nature of long-held secrets. They fester, they poison, they exert an immense pressure on the human soul. Dr. Finch lived in a gilded cage of his own making, yes, but forged by the cruel hand of Sir Reginald." "Sir Reginald really was a monster, wasn't he?" Hastings mused, pulling on his gloves. "To enjoy holding such power over someone, even driving them to murder." "Indeed," Poirot agreed, buttoning his coat with his usual exactitude. His satisfaction was perverse, a form of intellectual sadism, and it was that very satisfaction, that overreaching control, that ultimately led to his demise. A killer driven by desperation, born of another's cruelty. A servant appeared to open the heavy oak doors, revealing the vast, snow-covered landscape beyond. The flakes were still falling, soft and silent, cleansing the world. Poirot adjusted his hat. "And so, we leave Montrose Manor to find a new peace, I think. A hard-won peace, perhaps, built upon a difficult truth, but peace nonetheless. And just in time for our own Christmas, Hastings."
As they stepped out into the crisp, cold air of Christmas Eve, leaving the grand house behind, Hastings glanced back at the silent manor. The story within its walls was closed, the monster unmasked, and the truth, however unsettling, had set its inhabitants free, allowing Poirot and Hastings to return home for a well-deserved, if no longer entirely quiet, holiday.